Alright, so you guys already know how to touch off tools on the lathe, so what I want to show you now is how to touch off tools on a mill. So as far as the mill goes, you have to touch all of your tools off on wherever your Z0 is going to be, just like on the lathe. Now for most of our parts, if not all of them, our Z0 is always going to be the top of the part. So you need your part in the mill in order to touch all of this off. It's not like the lathe where we just touch it off on the vise or on the chuck. And so to put a part in these vices, it's a little bit different than what you're used to. What you want to do is there's only a little bit of play on this screw right here. You can kind of see that it pops up and down. And so I pop it up and I can pull this thing open a lot, or I can close it all the way up without actually using the screw. And the way that's working is, if you guys can see down in here, there's these little half moon shapes. And this mechanism engages in those half moon shapes. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have the screw kind of in the middle of its range. So you don't want to have it all the way tight, but you don't want to have it all the way loosened up. And then you want to put your part in here. You pull it open, you slide it until it sits on the ledges or on the parallels, depending on what we're using. You're going to have to decide where it's going to be left and right eventually, but for right now you just want to have it sitting in there. You want to push the vise shut, and then you want to push down on this mechanism, and you want to start to tighten it until it falls into one of these little grooves. You can kind of see it move down, and then it tightens. Now if it tightens up before it falls into a groove, what you have to do is you have to loosen it all the way up until it goes into the groove in front. So you would loosen it all the way, and it should pop down into the next groove that's forward right there. You can kind of see it just pop down. So I'm going to leave it in this groove, and I'm going to tighten it down while I'm holding down here. Okay, then snug it up with your wrench. Okay, it should tighten up, and sometimes, or what you want to do with these vices, you want to tighten it up, and then you want to check the actual part, because if you tighten this up without it engaging in the vices, this will tighten, the screw will tighten, but the part won't tighten up in the vise. So I can check, it's tight, everything's good to go, I take my wrench out. Now, just like the lathe, what I want to do is I want to bring all of my tools down and touch them off the actual top of the part. So I'm going to show you how to do that with one tool. Now you can see that I have tool number 1 in the spindle right now. And the way you can tell that is if you look down on the side of the carousel, it has a 1 right here. And since this slot is empty and it's facing the spindle, it means that tool number 1 is in the spindle right here. Now let's say I wanted to touch off tool number 3. What I can do is I can come over to the control, and just like on the lathe, if I go into MDI mode, now instead of it saying turret forward, it says ATC for automatic tool changer. And I can just hit the ATC forward, and the machine will come down, and it'll go to tool number 2. Now obviously I want tool number 3, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it one more time, and it goes and it grabs tool number 3. Now if you find that you want to go from tool number 3 to tool number 9, all you have to do is come up here into the MDI mode, which you're already in, and if you just type T9 and then enter, and it comes up right there, and then you hit the ATC forward button, okay, you actually don't hit enter, you just hit T9, and then you hit ATC forward, and it'll automatically go to tool number 9. So right now I want to be at tool number 1 again. So I'm going to hit T1, ATC forward, and it's going to automatically bring me right past tool 10 all the way to tool number 1. Now I'm going to use my handle jog to get my tool down close. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my handle jog. I'm going to start off on 10 thousandths per click. I'm going to select my X-axis. Right now you just want to get it close. So I get X and I kind of visually center it up over the part. I'm going to change my axis. Now you'll notice right over here on the control that I now have X, Y, and Z, whereas on the lathe I only had X and Z. So now I hit Y. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative because I'm going to use my hand wheel. I bring it over visually, make sure that it's kind of over the part, and now I'm going to bring Z. So I'm going to change it to Z, and then I'm going to bring Z down. Now be nice and careful and slow. Don't just start cranking on it. Get it down to about 1 inch, and then I want you to slow down to 1/1000th per click. Now that I'm close, I can see that I'm not quite over the center of the part, so I'm going to go Y and change it so that I'm right over the center of the part, or somewhere on the face. Now I'm going to change it back to Z, and then I take my piece of paper again, and the game is the same as was on the lathe. I'm going to go ahead and put my paper underneath. I'm going to bring my z-axis down until I'm close, and then I'm going to start bringing my paper underneath, and I'm going to bring it one click at a time while I'm moving my paper back and forth until it pins the piece of paper. And I'm just going one click. It's moving very slowly, but that's what I want. If you go too fast, you're going to jam it in. Now, I just started to bind this up, but I think I have one more click, and this should, yeah, now it just locked it all into place. So now you can see that it doesn't want to move. I'm pulling on it. It's there. It's referenced to the top of the part. You guys did this on the mills before. You're just touching it off. But now we have to tell the machine what length this is, because as you can see over in the tool carousel, I have some tools that are very short, I have some tools that are longer, and what we have to tell the machine is how far away this axis is from the part when it's touching the top, and it stores that into memory, in a work offset memory, so that we can make sure that the machine knows that information. So now once it's touched off, we come over to the control, just like on the lathe, and we go back to the offset button. Okay, it looks a little bit different than the lathe, but it's the same thing. So when we come into the offset, on the lathe there was two menus in one screen, but this older control, just so you know, if I hit offset once, it brings me to the tool offsets. If I hit offset again, though, it's going to bring you to your work 0 offset, which we're going to worry about later. So make sure you're on tool offsets. And just like before, you should see all the tools right there, 1 through, this one goes to 15, but really we only have 10 positions on our actual tool changer. You can see I have numbers in all 1 through 10, but nothing after number 10. So you want to make sure you're on tool number 1 and make sure it's highlighted. If you accidentally change and it's highlighted on tool number 2 right now, you're not going to change the correct value. You're going to change tool number 2 when you have tool number 1 in there, and it's going to be incorrect. So make sure tool number 1 is highlighted. Right now it says it's negative 4.621, but what I'm going to do is come down to my selection buttons over here, and I'm going to look at tool offset measure, and that's going to measure the length of it. So when I click this button, what you should see is a Z value change up top. And so I click it, and it changed into negative 4.691. So this one only changed a little bit. So what that tells me is the last piece that was in the vise was almost the same thickness as the piece I just put in right now. But that's not necessarily the case, and it did change by about 20 thousandths. So if you just left it alone, you'd be 20 thousandths off on all your depths with that tool. So that's how you would touch off your Z value. Now, just like the lathe, to back it away from the part, what I want you to do is I want you to push and hold the positive Z, and it will start to raise the Z away from the part. And now my paper frees up. I have about 100 thousandths of clearance. Then I can carefully look and make sure I'm going the right way with the actual hand wheel. And once I know I am, then I can crank it up and away. And then I could go ATC forward. If I had to keep touching off more tools, I would just hit ATC forward. It would tell me I'm in the wrong mode, so I have to go to MDI, ATC forward. Go to tool number 2, and I would do the exact same thing. I would just go back to my handle jog mode. I would start to crank Z down. X and Y should be good because the spindle's in the same location. I would just crank my Z down until it gets close. Okay, once it gets close, put my piece of paper in. Okay, I'm going to start wiggling back and forth until this one touches off. Starts to pin. I hit one more time. It pinned up. Okay, that's done. I come back to my control. I go back to my offset menu. Okay, but now what I want you to notice is tool number 2 is highlighted right here, but it stayed at tool number 1 on the actual length offset. So you have to make sure you hit the cursor button down, and that'll bring it down to tool offset 2. If I left it up at tool number 1 right here, and I hit the tool offset measure button, it would change the value for tool number 1 and make it think it's the same length as tool number 2. And what we can see right here is that tool number 2 is obviously shorter than tool number 1, so that would cause a crash if we didn't fix that. So we have to make sure that we select tool number 2 on the menu, and then hit my tool offset measure, and we can see that it changed by about 100 thousandths or so. So now tool number 2 would be good. And you would have to do that for every single tool that you're using for your program, whether it's 1 tool or 10 tools. You have to touch them all off before you get going. So that's how you would touch all your tools off. Remember, make sure you want to have the highlighted tool correct, otherwise you're going to mess up your offsets. You want to make sure that the part is touching the top of the tool is touching the top of the part and your paper is pinned down. And then you hit your tool offset measure button and it's going to measure it for you, and then you're good to go. Back the part away or back the tool away from the part, pressing and holding the Z. Once you're far enough away, you can get in there and make sure you're going the right direction and then crank it up and away. And that would be it.